go.
So in the Calvinistic reading of it, and I say Calvinistic, not Calvin himself, just talking about the tradition that comes
Yeah.
from him, the who has resisted his will thing typically means, well, he picks some to save and some to pass over, and that's his will, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't resist that.
Right. It's
Um,
irresistible grace is the
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
God can't be resisted. But if you read the Bible,
But you're
God
saying
is
it's more of a
constantly
right. It's more of a rhetorical question. Who can resist his will? Well, everybody resists his will, and yet he's still merciful.
right. Well, and actually, it's interesting. You said who can resist his will, and it's often translated that way. But
Ah,
in Greek, actually, Paul he's actually alluding to a couple other passages. So you have in Job, you've got who can resist his will in wisdom, the wisdom of Solomon, which is a book in the Apocrypha that actually Paul interacts with a good amount in Romans. Actually, often disagrees with the wisdom of Solomon.
mm.
Uh, the wisdom of Solomon asks more or less the same kind of question. It's in the aorist, where it's a proverbial kind of sense of like, yeah, who resists God? Like, come on.
Hmm.
Paul actually puts it in the perfect.
Gotcha.
So he asks an empirical question instead of a rhetorical question. He's asking the question, who has resisted his will? And this on the heels of the first 8 chapters of Romans, anybody should be going,
Everyone.
yeah, that would be us.
Yeah.
That would be all of us. So then who has resisted his will? Well, now let me tell you how God responds to that resistance. And in some cases, he just sticks with the molding of the clay a little bit longer. And then eventually he takes his hands off and says, now it's time for this piece to be hardened. And so hardening is that final moment where you are what you're going to be.
So the question for Romans 9 through 11 is not how does God decide which individuals get saved? The question is what? What question is Paul answering?
So first of all, Paul is answering the question of, okay, so if Jesus is the Messiah, and in Romans 8, he's talking about the Spirit has been given. This is this is the fulfillment of Jeremiah 31 and Deuteronomy 30 and Ezekiel 36, this promise of restoration and reconciliation with God. Yeah, that's great, Paul. That's the promise. But what about the restoration of Israel? Like,
Mm.
where are the 12 tribes? What's going on with all that? And by the way, what are these uncircumcised dudes doing getting the Spirit when this is promised to Israel? So now Paul has to explain that, and he has to explain how God's plan ends up looking different than what it might be expected to be. And part of what he leads with is this idea that God is working with a stubborn people.
Mm.
God's working with stubborn people. So first of all, we could take a step back. What did God choose Israel for to begin with?
That was a that's one of the most important questions.
Right? When God chooses his people Israel, which is what Paul's referring to in Romans 9 as well, he's not saying, okay, Abraham, here we go. I am choosing you and some of your descendants, not the ones from Ishmael and not the ones from Esau, and not, but some of your descendants to be saved, and everybody else can go to hell, literally. That is not what God promises to Abraham.
Yep.
God chooses Abraham, he elects Abraham for what? Well, this is a world that has already, up to that point in Genesis, it has been broken.
Mm.
It has gone through the flood. You have humanity, humanity is a mess. And what God ultimately does is he chooses one man and that one man's family, and he says, through you, I will bless all the nations of the world. I am choosing you to be the agent of blessing, the agent through which I'm going to bring my blessing to the whole world and to all humanity, to all the nations. Everyone who blesses you will be blessed, and everyone who curses you will be cursed. And in your seed, all the nations of the world will be blessed. Okay, good. So that's what Abraham is selected for.
So
Jacob receives the
real quick
same blessing.
on that. So his election in that sense is not an end in itself,
Right.
It's a means to another end.
Right. He is selected, he is picked for a purpose
Mhm.
to be used as an instrument of God's mercy to the whole world. That's what he's picked for.
And that
And
that
this,
assumption is under Romans 9 through 11.
right, because that assumption is the entire book of Genesis.
Yeah.
Isaac gets Abraham's blessing. That doesn't mean that Abraham's other children don't get any blessing or can't be saved or whatever, but Isaac is the one through whom all the nations of the world will be blessed. Jacob is the one through whom all the nations of the world will be blessed. You have this passed down in that way. And then finally we get to Israel in Exodus 19, and Israel is selected, they're elected, they're chosen, they're pulled out from the other nations, and they're brought to the mountain of God to come face to face with him. And they're selected for what? To be my precious possession, to be a nation of priests to all the other nations through whom God will work and through whom God will dispense justice and bring healing to the whole world. That's what Israel's selected for in Exodus 19. They are elected, they're selected not to be saved for their own navel gazing or so that they can have big parties, but rather they are selected for a specific purpose to bring the mercy of God to the world.
You might
And
say
then they rebel.
you, you might say their election is more about their mission than their own salvation.
That's right. Their
Yeah.
election is an election to a mission.
Yeah.
And then they rebel and they don't do it. And so, what Paul actually talks about in Romans 9 to 11, and this is the key to Romans 9 to 11 in so many ways, is he explains Israel was selected for this, but Israel rebelled at every turn. And so God dealt with he finishes Romans 10 with all day long I've held up my hands to a stubborn and contrite, or to a stubborn and contrary people, right? He quotes this statement from the prophet that the people constantly do not do his will. But what Paul says is God is such an amazing master potter that he's found a way to use Israel's rebellion and disobedience to still dispense the very mercy and the very grace of God through Israel to all the nations, in spite of them rather than because of them. And so
Yeah.
now their rebellion, which caused them to be scattered among the nations, actually leads to the salvation available for all the nations, because God's promise to Israel among the nations remains. And
Hmm.
so now their rebellion leads to life from the life for the nations and to their own life from the
Yeah.
dead, because his faithfulness goes beyond the grave and goes beyond Israel's infidelity. And that's the sum of the gospel. That's what Romans 9 to 11 is about.
I want to say thanks to everyone watching. Here at Theology Project, I'm committed to providing resources that will bring the Bible to life and equip you for faithfulness. I really appreciate that so many of you have subscribed to the channel, and I wanted to offer this personal invitation to those of you who are new to the channel to go ahead and click subscribe. I promise these videos represent my best effort to help you understand the Bible better and grow in your faith. Thanks for being part of this community.